I guess I'll just introduce myself real quick. I originally am from the area, grew up in San Ynez. At some point decided to join the military. I was in the Coast Guard for 6 years. Originally got stationed on a ship in Hawaii, got to travel to parts of Asia, been to Alaska and the Bering Sea in winter, checking out the deadliest catch guys and seeing what they're up to and looking for fishermen from other countries. I've been to islands in the South Pacific on another tour and ended up switching to aviation and worked as an avionics electronics technician on an HC-130 aircraft and operated out of Florida. Flew tons of missions down in the Caribbean, got to see a lot of islands, a lot of island people, a lot of food deserts, and just probably as part of my life goals have always been about trying to impact change and what I like to do. And I'll be talking to you guys a little bit about what I do now and with that goal in mind through sustainable agriculture. So I'm gonna just start going through here. A lot of you guys might have seen this graph before. It's something a lot of us are talking about. If you guys just look at where the graph is going, it kind of denotes exponential growth. A lot of people will call this a bell curve. And it's showing that our population is going to be over 9 billion by the year 2050. And we're going to have a lot of mouths to feed. And even in this country, the population is going way up, not to births, naturalized births, but to a lot of immigration. And we've got a lot of issues from a world scale that are going to be needed to be addressed, and some that are already impacting us in a great way. If we look at our genetic diversity over the last few decades or hundreds of years, we've gone through a loss of genetic diversity on the scale of when we lost the dinosaurs. We've just seen a huge impact with pollution, and it's all human change, in my own opinion. Some other factors that are in the critical, as you can see, are phosphorus and nitrogen ending up in oceans, rivers, streams, groundwater. All of this is part of the impact from agriculture. With our modern nation, another one of the big impacts you'll see on this graph is on the left side is the land system change. This is somewhat addressing if you ever hear about rainforests being destroyed and being used for agriculture. Anywhere where there's land, people are trying to turn it into a profitable agricultural area because of population growth. I'm going to be talking a lot about climate change today. You can see it in this graph, it's still denoted in yellow, but a lot of people are talking about it because there may be a shift or swing that could occur and cause a lot of issues. And it's still something that is contended by different parties, and I might share a few of my views, and I hope I don't offend anybody if you have different views. And I'll just keep going here. Let's see. Our food system is one area, if we talk about impacting change, where we can have a lot of impact. One of the first things to look at is the amount of food waste that's happening globally. In first world nations, most of food waste happens post-harvest, post-distribution. Once the food gets into your home, in your refrigerator, a lot of times we just don't use it. And in the US, approximately 1/3 of food is wasted. In the less industrialized nations, most of the food waste, approximately 40%, happens from the farm to the distributor or the marketplace. Just because they don't have the mechanical means to get things quickly like we do and store it efficiently with electricity. And just a really rough estimate, people are thinking we're going to need about 60% more food by 2050. And you can see that number as an offset slightly of population growth and the industrialization of third world nations, and how their food systems are going to alter to mimic ours. And let's see, one big factor with impacting change through food is everybody's got to eat food at some point. It's something we can't get away from. It's something that's integral to our environment that we create around us. And it takes up a lot of space and a lot of natural resources. A rough estimate for food production in our country, per capita, per person, it takes about 1.6 acres to feed each and every one of you. And they think with population growth by 2050, we're going to be over 500 million people in the US, and we'll only have about 0.6 acres per person to be able to produce food. So the space is shrinking. We don't have a lot of room for land, and a lot of it's devoted toward agricultural practices such as livestock and cattle, and growing the food that the cattle, livestock, and poultry and pigs may eat themselves. I'm going to pull up a little display that kind of defines where food is being produced as far as animal systems go. If you look at the scale there, it's the number of animals per square mile. I don't know if you guys can read it back there. And you can see the coloration is showing, you can see there's a huge amount of food production happening in California. A little bit of barren area in all of the arid or desert regions of our country, and a ton more food production in areas of our country seeing upwards of 30 inches of rainfall. In our region, generally we get about 18.5 inches of rainfall in the Santa Barbara region. Chickens, goats, sheep, turkey, these are all animals or livestock that we keep in much smaller spaces, and so you'll see much larger numbers, but the space being used is mostly allotted towards grazing animals or herd animals. And there's a couple of U.S. territories listed in the bottom corner there, if you didn't notice. This next slide is showing our crop type of production based on location. If you take a look at the two crops that are used for animal fodder, soybeans and corn. They're also the two largest bars in the graph there, and you'll see the distribution of where all of those crops are grown. And these are not for human consumption. These are produced in order to feed animals for human consumption. And so these lands are not necessarily shared with the cattle systems or the other livestock systems. They're separate, and they take up the majority of that space. This breaks it down a little bit more clearly. You'll notice in parentheses we've got, these are our millions of acres. Everything else is denoted by monetary value. So our corn and our soybean, you can see a little bit more clearly. We're using about $100 billion of harvest is happening on around 150 million acres. And if we look at other crops such as our vegetables, melons, and our fruits and nuts, which are more things that we might want to consume ourselves, it's at about 9.9, about 10 million acres being cultivated, and it's a very small chunk of this graph. And this is not showing the acreage needed for livestock systems such as cattle. So just growing the food, I'm just trying to emphasize how much energy and how much money is going into this type of food production. I've got a coupon for our farmers market if anybody can guess what's going on this graph, if anybody wants to give it a shot in the dark. Any takers? Go ahead and just shout it out if you think you know it. Water usage. No. This is, go ahead. Nope, although California is the largest exporter of food out of any of the states in our country. So, go ahead. Not almonds. Go ahead. Nope. This is, it's kind of a trick question. This is actually just a graph of where all the in and outs are located. So I kind of threw you guys off there, but this is it's just a chart showing where all the different in and outs are located, where all the beef is being distributed. And oh, are they already up there? Ah, my graph is outdated here. Ah, darn it. We've got a fact checker here. So one of the big problems that I've just re-emphasized through the last few slides is the problem of meat and how it's being processed and how it's happening in our agriculture. It's really creating part of the problem, and there's a lot of problems involved with it. Some are cultural. People have grown up and been raised that meat is a large portion of your meal. For a long time, back in the 90s, I don't know if anyone here remembers the food pyramid. Things were allotted differently. Food was looked at differently in stores. They would talk about low-fat foods, not about caloric intake, not about organic, not about the quality of the product. Most people were just worried about how fast and easy they could get it into their shopping cart, into their home, and whether or not it was going to make them fat. And there was I'm sure you guys have heard about it, a lot of it was pushing these big grain crops and these big meat crops. You guys have all seen the commercials for milk. You've all seen the commercials for all of these food eateries. It's just a heavy agenda because there's a lot of money behind it. Let's go to the next slide here. There are some current alternatives for meat, and this is just one way if you guys are going to look into personal, in your own livelihood, if you want to have an impact. The first benefit is just having a healthier diet. You'll be a healthier person if you start eliminating or lowering the amount of meat used in your diet. And the big one out there is cattle. So if you guys are ever looking into eliminating, maybe you still want to eat some meat, maybe just look into switching that steak for chicken, or maybe some bacon or something that's still good but isn't having as much of a drastic impact. And if you're ready to take the leap and start moving away from animal systems completely, we do have a lot of beans, lentils, grains. There's a plethora of foods out there to subsist on. You can still get all of your 8 essential amino acids that are the proteins that your body can't produce in order to be healthy without meats through plant-based proteins. And some of the future ones I've got listed down here below. The bottom one you can see here is a honey mesquite. This one is being highlighted more recently. I don't know if anybody's heard of this tree or seen one. Have you guys seen any mesquite around town? There's pods that come off of it. It's going to be a grain with a very high protein quantity, and you can dry farm it in California. The tree on the top here is another question guess if anybody wants to give it a shot. Anybody want to try to ID this plant right here? This is a coffee tree. And I'll give you a hint, it's the healthiest plant on earth. It's got over 86 nutrients that they've identified. Every part of the plant is usable, and it grows in subtropical regions, and we can grow it here. Quinoa. Quinoa, nope. Not spinach. Nope. This plant is Moringa. Moringa is the main name for it. This subspecies is Oleifera. And if you guys ever get a chance to research this plant, it's probably the most up-and-coming high protein value, high nutrient value plant out there. You're going to start seeing this in supermarkets. You're going to see it at farmers markets. It's going to be everywhere. And I recommend, if you can, buy a seed, grow your own at home. You can just strip a few leaves off and throw it into whatever you're cooking or eating. Unfortunately, plant-based proteins don't usually taste very good, so you just got to find a way to spice it up. So, organic versus sustainable, I'm going to jump into a topic that I think a lot of people rely on the federal brand or the federal label of organic, and kind of try to fall back on that knowledge basis of if it's organic, it's got to be good. And just as a personal opinion, I don't think that all organic food is good. I do believe that most of it is. So it's a great guideline, but still, it's great to ask questions. So some of the guidelines for organic: the seeds have to be saved from non-genetically modified, and they have to be cultivated organically. So they must follow the guidelines listed here. The plants must be grown in organic soil. If the farmer wants to switch to organic, they've got to let their field rest for 3 years before they can put a single seed in the ground to grow organic crops. They can put cover crops in, but they cannot cultivate, use, or till that soil, which is sometimes a limiting factor for a lot of farmers who would like to do it but don't have the money to do it. And after 3 years, whatever is in there may still be in there, but it's deemed safe for organic crops at this point. Organic crops still use pesticides. I think a lot of people might associate organic with there must be no pesticide use, but they're allowed to use a huge range of organic pesticides, things like cultivated bacteria that can be sprayed on plants for insect issues. There's BT is a really common one historically, bacteria thuringiensis. One of the newer ones is a spinosad spray, and a lot of farmers will use these on their organic crops. They'll wear protective equipment because they don't want to be inhaling this stuff. And it's just something that I think there's not really a lot being talked about, and there is a big assumption out there that organic means no pesticide use, but organic allows for pesticide use under the OMRI certification label. So if you're out there at a garden store, you might see this label on fertilizer products, soil products, or pesticide products. And any of these things with this label are for organic use. Fertilizers are another piece of the puzzle. Synthetically derived. Does anybody know how nitrogen is made or where that originated? This is another coupon question. If anybody can name even the era of time when we started creating synthetic nitrogen. Go for it. Yep. Do you know why? Yep. So the technology was developed. It's I think the Haber-Bosch process. There's a couple names of scientists involved who developed a way of synthesizing. This is for you whenever you want to grab it. Synthesizing nitrogen. And the process of synthesizing nitrogen is a huge draw on our economy again. 5% of the world's electricity and natural gas go toward the creation of synthetic nitrogen for our farm fields. And without this boost in nitrates available, we wouldn't be at the populations in the world we're currently at. We just wouldn't be able to grow the crops without it. And we're coming up with some really great alternatives to that using things like compost, which is going to play into our carbon sequestration and getting away from this conventional farming methodology. Fertilizers may contain animal products. I get a lot of questions at farmers market when I sell my product. Is this vegan? I have fish in my system, and so I say, I think that's for you to decide, but maybe it's good for you to understand that most of these are biological systems that are grown organically. You'll see things in the soil that are cohabitating with the plant roots, communicating with them, supplying nutrients, and a lot of the organic growers must rely on things like manure. There's virtually zero nitrogen-rich material out there that doesn't have manure or compost. So my best, piece of wisdom to hand off is even though something is categorized as organic, maybe don't take it as the best solution just yet. Maybe there will be another level or another categorization that you might align with more. Research what it means and come up with your own sustainable idea of what you think you want to purchase and what you would like to pursue as far as your food goes. Does everybody here think voting is important? Does everybody here want to vote or think that's something we need to do? I totally agree, but most of our voting is not done through a voting system. Most of it's done with money. So when you guys go to vote every day, you're probably out there voting. And every time you put one of these down, you have the chance to make a decision to vote on what you believe in. So if you're out there making purchases, consider it a vote. Don't consider it something you want to scrimp or save on if it's something that you believe is integral into the lifestyle you want to live. Change through action. So on that note, if anything presented here today speaks to you, then the first thing you can do to take action is share knowledge and information with people around you. And try to be stoic if you share these things. Try to share information and not push ideas on people. If they want to take the information and make their own assessments, they'll make their own decisions. If you go to any local eateries, a market, if you shop at a store, I know down the road here, I think we got a Vons. Does anybody here shop at Vons? If you talk to a produce manager and you want them to carry something that's synthetically grown or conventionally grown, there's a good chance they'll try to get an organic product in the store for you. If that's something that's important to you, it's worth having the conversation. Don't let the store dictate what you want to have in your plate in your home. And then you can decide to shop at local or sustainable outlets. Vons is probably the closest store to you guys, but there are a couple of really cool health food stores nearby. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of Tri-County Produce. That's a really close one. I don't think they carry anything there that is not organic. I think they try to carry virtually everything locally and sustainably grown. And locally can be a point of contention for these big companies like Vons. If you see a big marketing poster outside that says local, sustainable, their definition may be within 300 miles. So that sustainable product you're looking at purchasing might be all the way from Fresno. And if it has to go on a truck and it comes to here, there's nobody defining what that sustainable local is. They're just creating their own definition for it for marketing or advertising. So it's worth educating yourself to create your own sustainable definition for what you believe in. If you guys are interested in making change through action, you can also join a gardening club. Start growing your own food. You'll see the process. You'll learn more about it than you ever did just by shopping or by having food prepared for you. You'll get the hands-on. There's a ton of community gardens in virtually every city in America these days. Historically, we had victory gardens during World War II in order to produce more food for people during an economic shift. But if you ever get the chance, if there's a club out there where you can grow your own food, you'll probably get the highest quality, most organic, most sustainable food you'll ever have. And you'll know exactly where it came from because you did it. If you can't join a garden club, try to get a potted plant, put it in your windowsill, put it in your little outdoor entryway. It's even one small pot of food can make a lot of food, even if it's just a supplement like a spice or an herb. So I'll talk a little bit about my business. I didn't really highlight it at the beginning. So I grow in a greenhouse in Goleta. I've got one site where I am growing aquaponically. Does anybody here know a quick definition for aquaponics? It is a symbiotic relationship. Most of what I cultivate in my system is actually two types of bacteria that are beneficial to the system. So we're getting fish waste. Fish produce waste through their bodies and through their gills in the form of the ammonium we were speaking of earlier. They also produce phosphorus in the form of what I like to call fish manure. Some people call it fish poop. I don't know what they're talking about. Part of the goal of doing things aquaponically is to create your own nutrients on site with a form of biomimicry. And one of the biggest factors of what we're doing is saving water. Every study out there showing hydroponic and aquaponic operations have proven that it uses around 80 to 90% less water than conventional agriculture. And in an area like Santa Barbara, where we've seen periods of drought, this type of technology is probably something we want to start incorporating more of. And as you get further towards deserts, you'll see in places like Israel, there's a huge dramatic movement towards these types of technologies. Not only are we growing aquaponically, but we're also leasing some soil space more recently and looking into sustainable grow methodologies within a soil space, not using tractors, so there won't be any combustion happening at the farm. I've already tilled the whole space once. We're building permanent raised beds, and we're putting compost on top. So we're not going to mess with the soil biology and the soil life after the initial uprooting and tilling of the space. This will allow for all the living things in there that are able to pair with nutrients and the plants to be able to communicate and create bacteria-rich and mycelial-rich soil. That if you guys ever read about soil science, Elaine Ingram is probably on the forefront of soil sciences. She does workshops in California. If you look up her name, she's a great research person to know about within the realm of soil science, Elaine Ingram. So I'll just show you a picture. This is where this is what our greenhouse looks like. You can see a lot of green in there, kind of fun. We also, as part of our methodology and morality, have just gotten away from using any pest sprays or anything where you're putting something onto the plant itself. We just don't think that's the direction we want to go. So you'll see in this photo here, we've got some yellow going down the sides. This is just a sticky tape. Insects are attracted to the yellow color. They fly into it, they get stuck, and they die. So that helps us with a lot of our pest pressure. I do other things like we purchase at intervals ladybugs, and we release ladybugs into our greenhouse. And a ladybug in its lifetime can eat in its adult stage 5,000 aphids. And as when it's in its larval stage before it develops into the beetle, it can eat 10 to 15 aphids a day in that form, in addition to the 5,000. So they're just a great workhorse to have for your pest management, and I'd much rather put them on my plants than any type of pesticide, whether or not it's organic. We also do some other methods, like we trap ants to prevent them from bringing aphids and other pests onto plants. Ants have been found to farm, they'll farm aphids, and they take the sugary stuff that they kind of poop out, and they treat them kind of like cattle. And so ants and aphids always go hand in hand. So if you have an aphid problem in your garden, try to find the ants. This is an example of the style of market garden farming that we're going to be doing on our new property that we're developing. You can see it's very bio-intense. There's a lot of crop really close together. And this is just kind of showcasing the bed style that we're going to be implementing. And this will all be worked using hand tools again on an efficiency that can rival tractors. And we're just going to be proving it locally. And there's other farmers who've already done it. If you guys want to look up any of those guys, one of them, his name is Curtis Stone. He's been dubbed the urban farmer, and he's got a lot of YouTube videos if you're curious to see how this is done. There's also another guy named J.M. Fortier. J.M. Fortier is a French Canadian, and he's another guy up north doing a ton of amazing organic no-till food production. Those are some great names. If anybody needs those later on, I can fill you in. We've got some greater goals we're working towards with our farm operation as well. This next year, we're going to be hopefully evolving our business model. I think there's possibly some business students at this school. We're going to be changing it from a regular business into a cooperative. So it'll be an employee-owned company. So as we grow, anybody joining the company is going to have equal rights and equal shares of the company in order to allow for, trying to get away from the corporate model where one person is receiving the majority of the income or benefit. We're also developing a few new drought-appropriate crops, some cactus that are edible, and a few other perennials. And we're looking at doing more education. And in the future, we'll also be doing some impact abroad. We're going to be trying to get some funding to get groups to go to places that really need it. And here's a great name to take down if anybody's taking notes. Eric Tonesmeyer. He's an economist. He's taken a broad Earth approach, the whole world, to look at carbon and how to solve the problems we have with the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. Some of them are social, some are political, some are educational, and he's really taken a comprehensive look at this. Some of it is just educating people in third world countries about birth control or something that's just going to have an impact or change. And I recommend this book. It's really great read. These are some sources for the information you guys saw today, and I guess I'll open it up for questions or discussion if anybody has a comment or anything they want to say.